I think that it is helpful to really think about what is one place that we can really focus our energy that can then translate out. So rather than trying to throw our efforts into 500 different marketing strategies, how can we dial it back into one? And so for a lot of companies, content is a really great place to start. How can we have a content framework, or how can we have a really clear messaging strategy so that everything we're pushing out is echoing the same message? Because it's really that repetitiveness in marketing that's going to create the sales.
Hello, Profit First entrepreneurs and thought leaders. I am so excited. We have a special guest with us today. Her name is Sarah Michelle. Sarah is a brand strategist and identity evangelist, and she works with business owners as well as C-suite leaders to help them articulate their core brand message and navigate that intersection between who they are and how that translates to their business. She is the CEO of HoneyMap, and she has a podcast called the Successfulish Podcast. When she's not spelunking, I learned that word today, she is hiking with her two fur babies or drinking copious amounts of coffee in independent bookstores. So join me in welcoming Sarah Michelle to our platform. Hey, Sarah, how are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing well. How are you?
Very good. Well, I'm excited today because today we're going to be talking about rethink marketing. And this is a really great discussion because so much has changed in the world of branding and marketing. 2 years ago, Facebook ads worked. Now they don't as much. So I'm really excited to talk about that. And Sarah, first of all, I just like to get to know our guests a little bit more. Tell me how you got interested in this particular field of brand strategist as well as identity evangelism.
So I think really it started just from a general curiosity in my childhood. I really wanted to learn how to fit in. And I always joke about that Dr. Seuss book, Are You My Mother? With the little bird who's just walking around saying, Are you my mother? Are you my mother? I felt like that's who I was. Like, are you my people? Are you my tribe? Are you my group? And I knew how to talk to everyone, but I just never really felt like I fit in. And so I think, especially in middle school and high school, the more awkward years, I really had an interest in understanding human psychology and how people think and how to talk to different groups. And so that led me to a career in marketing. I got my degree in advertising and public relations, and then saw a little bit of all sides of it. So I did a little bit of the ad agency side, and then I switched over into global marketing, and then I started my own company. And when I was particularly in my own company, I really started seeing that there was such a parallel between who someone was and who their business was. And so in the agency side, I saw a lot of challenges of, well, it's all the client's fault. And then on the client side, I saw, oh, it's all the agency's fault. And when I was working with clients, I really started to see that when it comes to marketing, we're always looking for the next best thing. We're always looking for the best practices. And a lot of times that's not actually solving the problem, because the problem is not that we need better social media or we need a fancier website. A lot of times the problem is at the top. It's the person who's running the company. It's a miscommunication, or it's just misaligned vision. It's misaligned identity. And so that led to more of an interest in psychology. And I really started to rethink the way that I looked at marketing and branding and how I served my clients, with really making that connection with, rather than just jump into best practices, let's really get to the root of what the problems are and what we can actually solve.
I love that. Just that connection between psychology and marketing. You're right. They absolutely do have a lot to do with each other. You can't have marketing without some psychology behind it. And so let's talk about marketing today. Let's talk about the state of marketing today, some trends that you're seeing with that, things that work, things that don't work right now.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about marketing is that I have talked to, I don't know how many hundreds of CMOs and marketers and marketing strategists, brand strategists, and everybody defines marketing a little differently. And I think that it's actually a really entertaining thing, even to look through job descriptions of people who are hiring in their marketing departments. And when you read through the descriptions of what people are looking for, I don't think anyone actually has any idea what marketing really is. It's sort of just a catch-all for everything. And so I think part of what I feel came out of, especially going through COVID and how that affected businesses and having to rethink everything, I think people are realizing the importance of a really solid message. And so I think at the core of marketing, it's really just telling people who you are And so there's all kinds of different ways to do that. And I think that we've had little trends of whether it was social media or social media ads or websites were really big for a while. SEO was a big buzzword for a while. And all of these things are still really great. But I think what people are realizing more and more is that really the ultimate form of marketing is word of mouth. And so I think people are starting to see the connection more of we really need to look at the internal culture and what's being modeled in our business before we invest dollars in trying to externalize that in messaging. Because if there's miscommunication or a misidentity between who we actually are and who we're trying to communicate, we no longer can really hide behind a marketing message. We have so much transparency with social media that people really want to know who's running the companies that they're being a part of.
Ooh, that's so deep. I mean, look at who we are first before we actually market it, because we want to make sure that those two are synced and aligned. And that's so important now because, especially in this new generation of buyers, people are looking at what are you about, and they're looking for social good. And what are you doing as part of that message? That's a really interesting point that you bring that out. And so I guess, Sarah, with that discussion, that point that you're bringing out, then when you're starting to build a true marketing message looking inward, what are the steps that a company needs to do in order to begin to be able to build that brand, in order to be able to create that marketing?
Yeah, I think the first thing that any company needs to do is slow down. I feel like there's such a rat race competition where everything is due yesterday and everything is a priority and everybody's too burned out to even be able to hear themselves think. And I think that while everyone wants to really build the house and do the exciting, sexy part of business and marketing, we really need to slow down and look at the foundation and see, do we have a healthy foundation? Because if there's not a healthy foundation, it doesn't really matter how beautiful of a home you build, it's not going to work. And I think that's largely why CMOs generally have a lifespan of about 2 years in any given company. There's a very high turnover. And I think it's because we are expecting marketing to be a little bit of a magic button or a very quick solve all. And the reality is that really, when it comes to marketing, we should be asking a lot more questions rather than just jumping in with strategies. We really need to be thinking about who are we really? I think is the first question. Who are we? Let's really have self-awareness and be honest about some of the statements we're making, because there's a big difference between who you are versus who we want to be or how we want to be seen. So I think that self-awareness is really important, knowing who we are, and then thinking about where are we going? So are we just implementing these marketing best practices because our competitors are doing it or because we feel like we have to? I think we need to slow down and really ask why. Who are we? Where are we going? And who are we talking to? So I think that those three questions really need to be addressed before we invest any hours or dollars in running forward.
I love that. That's very true. Knowing who you are so that you can know who you can best serve. I think, I'm not going to date my age, but, I think of the 80s, I think of Wendy's, and you guys that might be in my age might remember the Where's the Beef commercial, the little lady, Where's the Beef? And Wendy's actually, they had an amazing marketing program, but when it came to fulfillment, when it came to actually ordering the burger, people were like, where's the beef? This is not the quality that I want. And so it ended up being a dismal failure for Wendy's to have that. So
Yeah.
you got to make sure that your internal structure can handle the volume, that it's attracting the right volume that you want.
Yeah.
Sarah, what else should a business do to create that marketing strategy?
I think that another really important thing with knowing who we are and being really honest about that is knowing how to create safe relationships with our customers. And so I think, especially in the age of social media and in an age of social awareness, customers really care about social issues. They care about what factories their goods are being made in. They care about what the CEO is doing in their free time. They care about whether there's diversity and fairness in the workplace. These are topics that consumers are becoming increasingly passionate about. And so I think that when we are just jumping forward with marketing and we're kind of presenting one way and we're checking the boxes, I think that people have a really good BS meter. And if we say something externally or explicitly, but someone is feeling something different implicitly, it creates this relationship of distrust. And I think that that is a lot of the friction that companies feel in their marketing. And so I always use the example of the girl who says, or the guy who says, I hate drama. And we all know that person, and we all know they're probably the most dramatic person that we have in our lives. And so that's an example of an unsafe relationship where someone has told us one thing but showed us another. And so now we have to do these mental gymnastics every time this person shows up to evaluate what's actually true. And so I think the best thing that we can do for our customers or our clients is to create that safe relationship so that they don't have to do any of those mental gymnastics when they're thinking about working with us. And I think that's the goal of marketing really, is to eliminate those barriers and to make our solutions available to the problems that our clients have so that they don't have to go searching for solutions. They don't have to do more work. We ultimately want to make their lives easier and better.
I love it. Make it easier for them to buy from you, right? They'll be like, I'm like looking for the click here button buy and I can't find it on your website, make it very easy and, and then stand up for who you are. What else do we need to do in order to create an amazing marketing campaign?
I think that when it comes to thinking of a creative marketing campaign or being really smart with it, I think that it is helpful to really think about what is one place that we can really focus our energy that can then translate out. So rather than trying to throw our efforts into 500 different marketing strategies, how can we dial it back into one? And so for a lot of companies, content is a really great place to start. How can we have a content framework, or how can we have a really clear messaging strategy so that everything we're pushing out is echoing the same message? Because it's really that repetitiveness in marketing that's going to create the sales. So typically, an average consumer needs to be touched 7 to 10 times to make any kind of purchase. And so we want to really make sure that they're getting the same message 7 times and not a bunch of different messages. It's almost like they're getting touched for the first time every time we interact with them. And so when it comes to profit and wanting to be profitable in our marketing, I think the challenge with that is to really think strategically of, let's think like the consumer. What do they need? How are they engaging? How are they shopping? And how can we take everything that we have internally and be really smart and efficient so that we're working smarter, not harder, and that all of our marketing efforts are really acting as investments and not as costs?
Definitely. So just building on that consistency and, don't have conflicting messages, right, with that, because that can be very, very confusing. I remember when we were having our marketing looked at and we were looking at logos and, I'm an accountant, I'm not an artist. And I remember we were like looking at our little graph and they're like, sometimes you have the diamond going this way, sometimes it's going that way. And I'm like, do people notice? They're like, yes, people notice, but being very consistent with that and your messaging. I've had people that were talking certain being prestigious about being very high ticket, but then they were offering a $29.99 product. And it was confusing for me, like you have this one that's several thousand, you've got this one that's
Yeah.
$29.99. Which one should I buy? Obviously I want $29.99, but I want results too. So just being very consistent with that is really, really important. So,
Yeah.
Sarah, when you see things going wrong in marketing nowadays, coming off of the pandemic now, going back into business as usual, what are some things that you're seeing in terms of trends that is different from maybe how things were done in 2020?
Think one of the biggest problems that I see in marketing, where I see things that could be changed around, are that there's too much focus on external marketing and either not enough focus or no focus at all on internal marketing. And I think that that is possibly the biggest place where businesses are losing money and losing profit. Because if we put all of our money into marketing and advertising, and we're coming from a place of panic of, oh, I need more customers, I need more consumers, how can I tell more people how awesome we are? Without stepping back and doing the internal work to actually say, are we as awesome as we say we are? It doesn't matter how brilliant our advertising campaigns are or how much we put out there. If your employees are unhappy and people are talking to them and they're saying, when they're having dinner with their friends and family and someone says, oh, you work for such and such company, what do you think? And they say, oh, it's awful, they're a hot mess. That one comment can get you so much more business or ruin your business as opposed to any kind of advertising. And so I think that it's so important for companies to take a look internally and really realize that anyone who's working with them, for them, whether it's an employee, whether it's a freelancer, a collaborative partner, they're brand ambassadors for better or worse. you essentially have a team of marketing. Marketing is not just a department. Anyone who interacts with your brand or with your company is marketing on your behalf. They're representing your company. And so before we spend thousands or millions or billions of dollars on advertising, I think it's so important to take a look inward and to really see, what are our employees talking about with our company? Are they happy here? Do they feel like they want to tell people to be participants in whatever we're selling or whatever we're offering? So I think that that is probably the biggest place where I see companies that are losing profit and revenue. And I think especially coming out of 2020 and COVID and rethinking the way that people have looked at employment, people are much more vocal about whether they're happy, whether they're unhappy. Everything is just so much more digital and transparent. And so looking inward, I think, is more important than it ever has been.
Oh, yeah. So how do you get that feedback? How do you get that feedback of what your employees or your vendors are saying to their family members at that dinner table when you're not there? How do you figure that out?
I think a lot of it comes down to listening skills. I think that being able to hear what's not being said, being able to pick up on body language, being able to pick up on energy levels, I think that that's a really important quality for leadership, for leaders to know how to do that with their team and to be able to recognize, does my team feel energized and inspired and excited to be here? Or do they feel burnt out where they clock out the second it turns 5 o'clock and they're not interested? Is there a spirit of defeat? Are my employees feeling like they're listened to, like they know that they're contributing, that they're a part of the team? And so I think a lot of it comes down to listening. I think a lot of it comes down to asking. And maybe that's an uncomfortable conversation. And maybe it takes a little bit of work to create a safe space for employees to be able to give that feedback and for leaders to be able to take that feedback and take it in stride. But I think that that's a really important thing for companies to work on. And I think when it comes to company culture and the health of a company, it really starts at the top. I think that, behaviors are caught, not taught, as the expression goes. And so I think that it's really important that at that top level, it's really clear, what is our culture? What are we modeling? What kind of environment do we want to have? And that we set that expectation to trickle down through the company. Because most of the time, if people leave a company, it's not because they don't like the job. It's not because they don't like the company. It's because they have a challenge with the person who is in charge or the person who's in leadership. So I think that that is a lot of what's involved in having that conversation. And that is probably the first place that any company should start when they're thinking about really wanting to be more profitable, more efficient.
I love it. I love it. Very great. Now, Sarah, as we wind down, one of the things that I like to ask our guests is, if you could leave our guests with one piece of advice, it could be personal, it could be business, what would that advice be?
Oh, there's so many different things that I would say, but I think that if I could leave with one piece of advice, it would be to be yourself. I think that one of the best gifts that any leader can give their employees, anyone following them, I think the best gift we can give someone is to be purely authentically ourselves. I think that that creates a safe space for other people to be who they are. I think it fosters a healthier, safer relationship for creativity, for thought sharing, to harness better relationships. And so I think that would be the one piece of advice, would be to take the time to really get to know who you are. Take the time to ask yourself, maybe take yourself on a you date and really find out, who are you? What are your values? What's important to you? What's your identity? And then work on being really confident in owning that. And I think that that will inspire everyone around you to do likewise.
I love that. I love that. Really know who you are. That's really great. And then everything just kind of starts building from there. Especially as you mentioned, Sarah, the company, it tends to run parallel with who the owner is. So having that company, that brand is parallel with your convictions is really, really important. So Sarah, how do our listeners find you, contact you, work with you? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, the best place to find me is on my website. It's justsarahmichelle.com. And that has links to all of my different company websites, social media. I'm at Just Sarah Michelle on social media, but the justsarahmichelle.com is really the house for everything.
Thank you, Sarah. This were some really juicy morsels, and it has been a pleasure speaking with you this afternoon.
You as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Sarah.